By the time I realized Claire Whitmore was crying, the engine was already running. Not loudly, just steady. A low, expensive hum echoing through the empty service bay at 3:30 in the morning while rain tapped against the dealership windows hard enough to sound like static. Nobody else was there anymore. The investors had gone home hours ago. The technicians had quit arguing. Even the night manager disappeared once it became obvious nobody knew how to fix the prototype. But Claire stayed. She stood across from me in heels she probably regretted wearing 12 hours earlier, arms folded tight like she was trying to hold herself together without letting anyone see it happen. Then her eyes landed on me. Not the engine, not the car. Me. Grease on my hands, coffee gone cold beside an open toolbox, my head throbbing from being awake too long, and my phone lighting up on the workbench with a missed call from my 7-year-old daughter. Claire looked at the screen, then quietly asked, "You stayed here all night, for us?" I should have said yes. Instead, I looked back at the engine and muttered, "No. I stayed because nobody else did." Before we get into this story, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I always like seeing how far these stories travel. And if you end up staying with me until the end of this one, maybe hit subscribe. This story took me a while to figure out how to tell honestly. Because some people don't walk into your life loudly. Sometimes they just stand under fluorescent lights at 2 in the morning while your whole world is quietly falling apart. The day all this started, I was 40 minutes late, picking up my daughter from after-school art club. Again, by the time I pulled into the elementary school parking lot, most of the cars were already gone. The sky over Matthews had turned that washed-out gray North Carolina gets before rain, and the air smelled like wet asphalt. Lily was sitting on the curb outside the front office with her backpack in her lap. She saw my truck and immediately stood up. No attitude, no guilt trip. That somehow made it worse. "Sorry," I said the second she climbed in. "It's okay." It wasn't okay. There were goldfish crackers crushed into the passenger seat and 3 unpaid parking tickets shoved into the cup holder. My truck made a weird clicking noise every time I turned left too hard, which felt ironic, considering I spent most of my life fixing other people's cars. Lily buckled herself in and held up a drawing. "I made this one pink because normal race cars are boring." The drawing looked like a Ferrari melted into a unicorn. "It's terrifying," I told her. She smiled proudly. "Thank you." That got a laugh out of me for the first time all day. We stopped at a gas station on the way home because I needed coffee and she wanted those powdered mini donuts that somehow survived nuclear war without expiring. Inside, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. "Hello." A pause. Then Evan. I recognized the voice after a second. Tom Bennett, former service manager at Hawthorne European Auto, the place I walked out of 4 years earlier and never went back to. "What do you want?" "Well, good to hear you too." I grabbed the coffee from the counter while Lily wandered toward the slushie machine. "I'm busy, Tom." "Yeah, I heard. Look, this isn't social. I got your number from Miguel." That made me stop walking. Miguel only gave my number out when something was serious. Tom lowered his voice. "We got a situation over at Whitmore. The dealership." "Yeah." Whitmore Auto Group was one of those polished luxury operations where every employee looked like they moisturized twice a day and never sweated through their shirts. Not exactly my crowd. "What kind of situation?" Tom exhaled hard. "Prototype hybrid engine. Investor demo tomorrow night. Their lead diagnostics team can't figure it out." I leaned against the coffee counter. And Claire Whitmore is losing her mind. Still not seeing my problem. "You used to specialize in thermal mapping systems." Used to. There it was. The thing I spent years trying not to think about. Back before hospital bills, back before custody schedules, back before my marriage collapsed slowly and then all at once. I watched Lily press her face against the slushie machine glass like it was the greatest technological achievement in human history. "How much?" I asked. Tom laughed once. "There's the Evan I remember." "No, there's rent." Another pause. Then he named a number. It was enough to cover Lily's overdue asthma medication refill and maybe keep my electricity from getting shut off next month. I hated that my answer came faster after that. "When?" "Tonight." I rubbed my jaw. "I'm not putting on a uniform." "You won't." "I'm not dealing with corporate idiots hovering over me pretending YouTube made them engineers." "That part I can't promise." Lily walked back holding a blue raspberry slushie bigger than her head. "Dad, look. That thing's radioactive." "It's blue." "Exactly." Tom was still waiting on the phone. I stared out through the gas station windows at the darkening sky. I should have said no. Honestly, I wanted to. The last time I worked inside a dealership, I slept in a hospital chair for 3 nights straight while my daughter struggled to breathe through an oxygen tube. Hawthorne fired me 2 weeks later for attendance inconsistency. Corporate language always finds cleaner ways to say ugly things. Evan. I closed my eyes for a second. One night I said, "That's it." Tom sounded relieved immediately. "I'll text the address." I hung up. Lily sipped her slushy loudly. "You made your tired face." "I always have my tired face." "No, this one's different." Kids notice things you spend years trying to hide. We drove home through light rain, windshield wipers squeaking every few seconds. Our apartment complex looked the same, as always faded brick-buzzing stairwell lights, somebody grilling even though it was drizzling outside. After Lily showered, I helped untangle her hair while she sat cross-legged on the couch watching cartoons. "You working tonight?" she asked quietly. "Yeah." She nodded like she already expected it. That hurt worse than if she'd complained. I tucked a blanket around her shoulders. "I'll be back before school." "You promise?" I looked at her for a second too long, then nodded. "Yeah, Bug, I promise." At 9:13 that night, I pulled my old pickup into the glowing entrance of Whitmore European Motors. Glass walls, white marble floors, brand new Jaguars lined up under showroom lights, and reflected in those giant windows. A tired single dad in oil-stained boots who already knew he didn't belong there. The valet tried to stop me before I even made it to the front doors. Not aggressively. Just the polite kind of suspicion rich places specialize in. "Service entrance is around back, sir." I looked past him at the showroom floor glowing under soft white lights. "I'm aware." He hesitated when I kept walking. My truck probably didn't help. The passenger door had a dent from somebody backing into it at Food Lion 3 years earlier, and I still hadn't fixed it. Most days I barely noticed anymore. Tonight suddenly I did. Inside, the dealership smelled like leather espresso and expensive air conditioning. Too cold, too clean. A woman in heels crossed the showroom, holding a tablet against her chest while talking into an earpiece. Somewhere deeper in the building, someone laughed too loudly at something that probably wasn't funny. Then I saw the car. Black prototype sedan parked inside the center service bay behind glass walls. Half the engine components were already stripped apart, which usually meant one thing. Too many people had touched it. Tom appeared from a hallway near the office's tie loose, looking like he'd aged 10 years since I last saw him. "You came. Don't sound so surprised." He walked me toward the secured bay. "You have any idea how bad this is?" "Nope." "Good. Keep it that way." That almost made me smile. Almost. Before we reached the bay doors, another voice cut across the room. "Tom." Sharp, controlled, tired. Claire Whitmore walked toward us with the kind of posture people develop after years of never wanting to look uncertain in public. Mid-30s maybe, dark blonde hair pulled back low, navy pantsuit, no coat despite the rain outside. She looked expensive without trying to, but not in a flashy way. More like someone who'd learned how to survive rooms full of powerful men by never appearing soft for even half a second. Her eyes moved to me, paused briefly on the oil stains on my jacket, then back to Tom. "This is him. Not rude exactly. Worse. Disappointed." Tom cleared his throat. "Evan Miller. Used to do diagnostic work over at Hawthorne." "I know who he is," she said. That caught me off guard. Claire extended a hand anyway. Her grip was firm, cool from the rain. "Thank you for coming." I nodded once. "You said the engine won't stay running. It shuts down after 11 minutes. Any warning codes?" "All inconsistent. That usually means somebody ignored the first real one." Tom looked away immediately. "Yeah, thought so." Claire noticed it too. The silence stretched just long enough to get uncomfortable. Then she stepped aside toward the service bay. "Show him everything." Inside the glass-walled garage, 3 technicians stood around the prototype looking exhausted and defensive at the same time. One of them glanced at me and muttered, "That's the guy." I pretended not to hear it. The hood of the prototype was already open. I walked around the vehicle slowly first without touching anything. People rush diagnostics because panic makes them feel productive. Usually just makes them blind. "What's been replaced?" I asked. One technician started listing parts immediately. Fuel regulator, heat exchanger, control module, wiring harness, sensor array. I stopped listening halfway through. Too much. Way too much. I crouched near the front wheel well and looked at the thermal shielding. Scorch marks. Tiny ones. Easy to miss unless you knew where to look. "How long before shutdown?" 11 minutes, Claire answered from behind me. "Exactly. Close. It's not the same thing." One technician folded his arms. "With respect, we already checked thermal load." I looked up at him. "With respect, no, you didn't." The room went quiet after that. I stood and finally looked directly at Claire again. Who drove it last before the failure started? A rep from Keller Automotive during the test event. He pushed it hard. He was showing off for investors. Yeah, I muttered. That tracks. Claire crossed her arms tighter. Can you fix it? There it was. Not hello, not what do you need, not take your time. Can you fix it? I wiped my hands on a rag hanging from the toolbox. Maybe? Her expression cooled instantly. Maybe isn't very comforting. Neither is replacing half an engine before understanding the problem. Tom looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. Claire stared at me for a second. Not angry exactly. More like she wasn't used to people speaking to her without cushioning every sentence. Finally, she asked, what do you need? I pointed around the bay. Less people. One technician scoffed under his breath. Claire heard it. So did I. She turned toward the staff immediately. Everybody out except Tom. The tech blinked. Claire. Out. No yelling, no scene, which somehow made it harsher. The room emptied slowly. Once the doors shut, the whole dealership suddenly sounded different, quieter. Rain tapping the windows, distant hum of fluorescent lights. I opened the diagnostic panel again. Claire stayed near the doorway watching me. You planning on standing there all night? I asked. This prototype is worth almost $2 million. And staring helps. That should have annoyed her. Instead, something strange happened. The corner of her mouth moved slightly, like she almost smiled before deciding against it. I don't usually leave important things unattended. I slid under the front end with a flashlight. People aren't engines, you know. The silence after that felt heavier than I expected. A few seconds later, she answered quietly, no, they're usually harder. I don't know why that stuck with me. Maybe because it didn't sound rehearsed. Maybe because for the first time since walking in, she sounded tired instead of polished. I worked another 20 minutes without speaking. The deeper I got into the system logs, the more obvious it became that the problem wasn't mechanical. It was timing. Heat compensation delay. The engine wasn't dying because it overheated. It was dying because the system believed it overheated. And somebody had buried the original sensor conflict under 6 unnecessary repairs. I sat back slowly on the rolling stool. Claire noticed immediately. What? I stared at the engine. Then at the stack of replaced components sitting uselessly nearby. Then finally at her. You got people in this building who know how to swap parts, I said. But nobody here's actually listening to the car. Her eyes held mine a second longer this time. Long enough to feel something shift slightly between us. Not attraction. Not yet. Just recognition. Like two exhausted people realizing the other one might actually understand pressure. Then her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and exhaled sharply. Investors, she muttered. I looked back at the engine. Yeah, I said quietly. Those'll do it. By 11:30, the dealership had mostly emptied out. The showroom lights stayed on, reflecting off polished cars nobody was buying at midnight. But the energy changed after the last sales managers left. The building stopped pretending to be impressive and started feeling tired. More honest somehow. Tom disappeared around 10 after promising to be available by phone, which usually means absolutely nothing. That left just me, Claire, and a $2 million prototype that still thought it was overheating itself to death. I was halfway inside the engine bay tracing wiring when I heard heels approaching again. You're still here, I said without looking up. I could say the same thing. You're the CEO. CEOs don't sleep. Neither do single fathers, apparently. That made me glance at her. She'd taken off the blazer at some point. The sleeves of her white blouse were rolled up now, and her hair wasn't holding together the way it had earlier. A few loose strands framed her face. Weirdly, she looked younger like this. Or maybe just less guarded. She held out a paper coffee cup toward me. I didn't know how you take it. I accepted it carefully. That's brave. You say that like mechanics are difficult. No, mechanics are easy. Exhausted men with caffeine deprivation issues are dangerous. Another almost smile. Small, fast, gone immediately. She leaned lightly against the workbench while I pulled up thermal graphs on the diagnostic tablet. You really think the issue started with the sensor conflict? I think somebody ignored the first warning because the car still technically ran. And then panic happened. Claire folded her arms. That obvious? Rich people panic differently, I said. You guys throw money and employees at things until the original problem disappears under paperwork. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. You always this insulting. Only when I'm tired. You've been insulting since 9:13. I looked over at her. You noticed the exact time. The second the words left my mouth, I saw it happen. A flicker of regret crossed her face like she hadn't meant to reveal that. Then she straightened again. You were late. That sounds personal. It was inconvenient. Ah, there she is. That actually got a real smile this time. Tiny but real. It disappeared when her phone buzzed again. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. Important, I asked. She stared at the screen for a moment before locking it. If I answer one more investor call tonight, I might drive this prototype into a lake myself. Seems bad for business. At this point, it might improve morale. I snorted before I could stop myself. Claire noticed. So you do laugh? Rarely. I'm honored. The thing was, she didn't flirt when she spoke, didn't tilt her head or lower her voice, or do any of the polished corporate charm stuff I'd seen rich people use at fundraising events and dealership parties years ago. She just sounded tired, which somehow felt more dangerous. I turned back toward the engine before my brain wandered somewhere stupid. Around 8 o'clock, my phone alarm went off. Not loud, just one soft vibration. But I reached for it immediately. Claire noticed. You need a break. Need to make a call. Something shifted in her expression then. Like she remembered I existed somewhere outside this building. I walked toward the quieter corner of the bay near the parts shelves and hit FaceTime. Lily answered almost instantly. Her face appeared sideways first. Dad, you're upside down. No, you're upside down. She gasped dramatically. Oh my God. I could hear cartoons in the background. You brush your teeth yet? A suspicious pause. Maybe. Lily. Fine. Grandma made me. Good. She adjusted the phone closer to her face. You still fixing the rich people car? Trying to... Does the rich lady know what she's doing? I rubbed my forehead, already tired. She's standing like 6 feet away from me. Lily's eyes widened. Oh. From across the bay, Claire lifted one hand silently in greeting. To my surprise, Lily waved back immediately. She looks mean, Lily whispered loudly. Claire actually laughed, not politely, not controlled. A real laugh she tried and failed to hide behind her hand. I stared at her for a second too long. Then Lily squinted at the screen. Wait, she's pretty. Okay, I muttered. Good night, Dad. Brush your teeth again. That's not how teeth work. It is tonight. She groaned dramatically before blowing a kiss toward the camera. Love you. The words hit me the same way every time, like someone grabbing my ribs from the inside. Love you too, Bug. The call ended. For a few seconds, neither me nor Claire said anything. Then she looked down at the floor and asked quietly, How old is she? 7. She seems comfortable talking to you. I frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing bad. Claire tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Just, some parents don't sound like that with their kids. I didn't know what to say to that. So instead, I sat back down near the engine and picked up the diagnostic tablet again. A minute later, she spoke once more. My father outsourced most conversations. I looked up. Claire was still staring at the concrete floor. He'd send assistants to school events if he was busy, she said lightly. One time he sent our regional finance director to my piano recital. I blinked. You're kidding. I wish. Something about the way she said it made my chest tighten unexpectedly. Not pity, just recognition. People grow up lonely in different zip codes. The rain outside intensified around midnight, hammering against the glass service doors hard enough to drown out the music playing faintly overhead. I leaned deeper into the engine compartment, rerouting the thermal feedback sequence manually. Claire watched quietly for a while before finally asking, How long have you been doing this? Since I was 19. You're good at it. Yeah, not arrogance, just true. She studied me after that answer. Most people get uncomfortable when someone says they're good at something without apologizing for it. Claire didn't. You know, she said softly, everyone else in this building keeps trying to sound smarter than the problem. I tightened one final connector carefully. And you. Her eyes met mine across the dim garage lights. I'm just trying not to drown before tomorrow morning. Something in me understood that immediately. More than I wanted it to. Then finally, for the first time all night, the engine tried to turn over and failed. But this time, it got farther than before. Claire heard it too, and the look she gave me after that wasn't skeptical anymore. It was hope, which honestly scared me more. The second the engine almost turned over, the entire mood inside the service bay changed. Not dramatically. Nobody started cheering. No cinematic music kicked in. But hope is loud when people have been expecting failure all night. Claire straightened immediately. What changed? I kept my eyes on the diagnostic screen. Nothing yet. But it tried. Yeah. I hated how careful I sounded. Because the dangerous part about fixing complicated systems isn't confidence. It's optimism. Optimism makes people rush, makes them careless, makes them celebrate before the thing is actually alive. I unplugged the tablet and slid underneath the front end again. The concrete floor was cold through my jacket. Behind me, Claire paced once across the bay heels, clicking softly against the polished cement before finally stopping. You always this patient, she asked, when the alternative cost $2 million. Yeah, that car isn't worth $2 million. No, I muttered, but the people funding it probably are. That earned a quiet exhale that almost sounded like a laugh. Outside the glass walls, the rain had slowed into a misty drizzle. Charlotte looked half asleep through the showroom windows, traffic lights blinking yellow, empty roads reflecting neon from late-night restaurants down the street. I checked the thermal compensation line one more time. There. Tiny voltage fluctuation, barely visible, but enough. I rolled out from under the engine and stood slowly, my back cracking loud enough for Claire to hear. You okay? Old. You're 30-something. Exactly. She folded her arms again, though softer this time. You want another coffee? Number. You sure? I'm 1 cup away from hearing colors. That got another laugh out of her. Short, tired, real. I noticed then that she'd stopped looking at me like a contractor hours ago. Now she watched me more carefully than that, like she was trying to understand something. I ignored the feeling and reached for the ignition sequence again. Try now, she asked. Maybe. There's that word again. I glanced sideways at her. You want mechanics who guarantee things, Claire, hire liars. For a second she just stared at me after I said her name. Like hearing it without Ms. Whitmore attached felt strange. Then she stepped closer to the engine bay. Close enough that I caught the faint scent of rainwater and expensive perfume that had mostly faded under exhaustion. Okay, she said quietly. No guarantees. I turned the ignition. The engine coughed once, twice. Then suddenly, it caught. A deep, smooth hum filled the garage. Steady idle, no thermal spike, no warning shutdown. Just clean combustion and electric synchronization finally behaving the way it should have from the start. Neither of us moved immediately. I stared at the diagnostic screen waiting for the failure. 1 minute. 3. 5. Still running. Behind me, Claire let out a breath so shaky I realized she'd been holding herself together by force for hours. Oh my God, she whispered. I checked the heat compensation graphs again. Stable. The prototype purred quietly under the fluorescent lights while warm air rolled through the service bay. Then the doors burst open. 3 managers hurried inside almost at once, followed by 2 exhausted technicians. Tom among them. What happened, someone asked. Claire looked up slowly. It's running. Everybody started talking over each other immediately. How did you replace the regulator? I told them it was software. We should document everything before morning. I stepped away from the engine and wiped my hands with an old rag while they crowded around the car, pretending they had all been part of the miracle. Same everywhere. Success has a lot of fathers. Failure gets abandoned in parking lots. One technician looked over at me. So what was it? Thermal compensation conflict. He frowned. That's it. I looked at the pile of replaced components stacked beside the wall. That was always it. Nobody spoke after that. Tom coughed awkwardly. Well, hell. One of the managers stepped forward, already shifting into corporate recovery mode. We'll need a full written report for the investors. Claire, we should probably position this as a collaborative number. The room went still. Claire's voice hadn't gotten louder, but it cut clean through everybody anyway. She nodded toward me. He fixed it. The manager hesitated. Of course, but from a public relations perspective. He fixed it, she repeated. Different this time. Colder. Nobody argued after that. I should have appreciated it more than I did. But honestly, by then I was just tired. Tired enough that my hands shook slightly from caffeine and no sleep. I packed my tools quietly while the others circled the prototype. One of the younger techs approached me carefully. Hey, he said. That thermal catch, I wouldn't have seen that either. I shrugged. Most people wouldn't. That's insane. No, I said, just experience. He nodded slowly like he was trying to memorize the moment. Meanwhile, Claire walked across the bay toward me while the managers kept talking behind her. You're leaving. Sun's coming up. You should stay long enough to finalize payment. I trust Tom. Tom immediately looked nervous. Wow, he said. That feels irresponsible. I zipped my toolbox shut. Claire studied my face for a second. You look exhausted. That's because I am. Something unreadable flickered through her expression then. Concern, maybe. Or guilt. I couldn't tell. Then one of the senior managers behind her spoke up casually. Still can't believe an independent mechanic figured out what our entire diagnostics department missed. The tone sounded harmless. It wasn't. I knew that tone. Everybody in blue-collar work knows it. The kind that smiles while quietly reminding everyone where you belong. Another manager added, well, sometimes fresh eyes help. I looked at the prototype, then at the marble floors, The glass offices, the polished executives pretending embarrassment and gratitude weren't wrestling each other in real time. Finally, I shrugged into my jacket. Or maybe you stopped listening to the car after expensive people started panicking. Silence. One technician looked down immediately to hide a grin. Claire tried not to smile too. The manager's face tightened. I picked up my toolbox. Then the older executive said, "Out of curiosity, how'd a guy like you even learn systems this advanced?" There it was. Guy like you. I'd heard versions of that sentence my whole life. I could have ignored it. Probably should have. Instead, I looked him directly in the eye and answered, same way doctors learn medicine. The room went quiet again. Claire's gaze stayed on me the entire time. Not embarrassed. Not amused. Just watching. Like she was realizing something about me she hadn't expected when I walked through those doors. I headed toward the exit without another word. Halfway there, Claire called after me. "Evan." I stopped. She stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly away from the others. "Thank you." Simple words. No performance attached. I nodded once. Then noticed her staring briefly at my phone lighting up in my jacket pocket. Wallpaper photo. Lily asleep on the couch, holding one of her toy cars against her chest. Claire looked at the picture for barely a second before glancing back up at me. Something softened in her face. Then she asked quietly, "Did you make it home before school like you promised her?" I looked toward the brightening sky outside the glass windows. Honestly, I wasn't sure I would. I made it to Lily's school with 4 minutes to spare. Barely. The morning traffic through Charlotte crawled like everybody collectively decided to ruin my life before 8:30. By the time I pulled into the drop-off lane, I looked like someone who'd survived a small natural disaster, which honestly felt accurate. Lily climbed out of the truck holding her backpack and stopped halfway to the sidewalk. "You smell weird." "Thank you." "No, like burnt robot weird." "That's oddly specific." She narrowed her eyes at me. "You didn't sleep. Neither did you technically." "I'm 7. That's different." "Fair point." I leaned over the center console and fixed the hood of her jacket. "Hey." "What?" "You got your inhaler." She patted her backpack immediately. "That reflex alone probably cost me 5 years of stress-related aging." "Good." She studied my face for another second, then quietly asked, "Did you fix the rich people car?" I nodded once. Her whole face lit up. "I knew it." "You did not." "I absolutely did." She started walking backward toward the school entrance. "You should charge extra if they were rude to you." Interesting business strategy. "I'm serious." "I can tell." Then she disappeared through the doors with the rest of the kids while crossing guards waved traffic forward impatiently. I sat there another few seconds after she left, just breathing. That weird empty feeling after surviving something exhausting. My apartment was silent when I got home, except for the hum of the refrigerator and rain tapping softly against the balcony railing. I slept for maybe 4 hours before my phone started vibrating across the kitchen counter. Unknown number again. I stared at it for a while before answering. "Yeah, Mr. Miller." Female voice this time. Professional, controlled. "Claire." I sat up slowly on the couch. "You people ever sleep over there?" A pause. Then unexpectedly, "Not this week." Her voice sounded different during daylight. Less sharp. Still polished but thinner somehow, like exhaustion stripped away some of the armor. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Nothing's wrong. That's never why CEOs call mechanics." I heard movement on the other end, maybe heels across tile. Then the investor preview went well. "Congrats. I wanted to thank you properly." "You already paid me." "That's not what I meant." The silence after that stretched longer than it should have. I rubbed sleep out of my eyes. "Look, Claire, there's a diner near Fairview Road," she interrupted gently. "Marlowe's." "I know where it is. I'm there right now." I frowned. "Why?" Another pause. Then finally, "Because I haven't eaten since yesterday afternoon and I didn't want to sit alone." That caught me off guard enough that I didn't answer immediately. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere far off across the city. "You asking me to lunch?" I asked carefully. "I honestly don't know." That answer felt more real than if she'd flirted. I checked the microwave clock. 2:17 p.m. Lily's after-school art club ran until 5:30. And somehow, against my better judgment, I heard myself say, "Give me 20 minutes." Marlowe's diner sat squeezed between a pharmacy and a nail salon in one of those suburban shopping centers that all look vaguely temporary no matter how long they've existed. Claire looked wildly out of place there. Not because she was dressed fancy this time, she wasn't. Dark sweater jeans hair tied back loose. But because she sat too straight, too aware of herself. Like someone raised in boardrooms trying to understand laminated menus and bottomless coffee refills. The waitress already looked emotionally invested in whether she survived the experience. Claire spotted me near the entrance and lifted one hand slightly. I slid into the booth across from her. "You picked this place?" I asked. "You said last night all the expensive restaurants around here overcook steak because they're afraid of lawsuits." That sounds like something I'd say. It is. The waitress appeared immediately. "You two ready?" Claire looked at me first like she needed instructions. I tried not to smile. "Burger's good," I told her. "Okay," she said to the waitress. "Then that. You want fries or onion rings, honey?" Claire blinked once at the word honey. "Fries are safer," I muttered. The waitress nodded approvingly and walked off. Claire watched her leave. She called me honey. "Welcome to North Carolina." That felt strangely aggressive. I laughed before I could stop myself. A real one this time. Claire noticed instantly. "There it is again." "What? You act like laughing costs money." "Depends who's charging." For a little while, neither of us talked much. Country music hummed softly from overhead speakers while rain streaked down the windows beside our booth. Outside, traffic rolled through puddles. Inside, somebody argued quietly near the register about coupons. Normal life. Claire wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "I used to think diners only existed in movies." "You grew up rich, huh?" She gave me a dry look. "My father had a chef named Laurent." Jesus, he hated me. That seems personal. I microwaved macaroni once. I stared at her for 2 full seconds. Then laughed hard enough. The waitress glanced over worriedly. Claire smiled into her coffee. Not proud of herself. Just relieved to hear the sound. And weirdly, I got it. The food arrived a few minutes later. Claire took one bite of the burger and immediately looked offended. "Oh no. What? This is actually good." "Yeah, that's the danger." She shook her head slowly. "I spent 12 years eating tiny decorative food at fundraising dinners for no reason. Tragic. You're making fun of me." "A little." Another silence settled between us. Not uncomfortable this time. Just quiet. Then Claire glanced toward the front window suddenly. I followed her gaze. My truck had just pulled into the parking lot. Correction. My mother was driving my truck, and Lily was climbing out of the passenger seat, waving through the glass like she'd just spotted celebrities. "Oh no," I muttered. Claire looked confused. "What?" My mother just betrayed me. Before I could explain further, the diner doors swung open, and Lily spotted Claire immediately, the shiny car lady. Every head in the diner turned toward us. Claire froze. Completely, like nobody had warned her children moved that fast. Lily marched directly to our booth holding a folded piece of paper. "I drew another car," she announced proudly. Then she handed the drawing straight to Claire. It was a bright red sports car with giant wings and what looked suspiciously like eyelashes. Claire stared down at it, then quietly asked, "Why does it look angry?" "Because it's expensive." I covered my face with one hand, and for the first time since meeting her, I heard Claire Whitmore laugh so hard she couldn't hide it anymore. Claire tried very hard not to look terrified of my daughter, which unfortunately for her only made Lily more interested. "You're prettier when you laugh," Lily announced while climbing into the booth beside me like she owned the place. "Lily," I warned quietly. "But it's true." Claire blinked once, visibly unprepared for direct honesty from a 7-year-old. "Thank you," she said carefully. My mother approached the table next, carrying the expression of a woman already collecting emotional material for future phone calls. "Evan," she said way too innocently, "you didn't mention lunch plans." "Because I didn't know I had them." Her eyes slid toward Claire immediately. Claire stood halfway out of politeness. "Claire Whitmore." "Oh, I know who you are." Of course she did. Everybody in Charlotte with a television knew who Claire Whitmore was. My mother shook her hand warmly anyway. "Diane Miller, I'm the one keeping this family functional." "That feels accurate," I muttered. Lily pointed dramatically at Claire's fries. "She doesn't eat diner food correctly." Claire looked alarmed. "There's a correct way. You need ketchup." "I'm okay without—" "No," Lily interrupted seriously. "You really don't." 10 minutes later, somehow Claire Whitmore was sitting in a suburban diner, listening to my daughter explain condiment strategy like it was military training. And the strange part, Claire listened. Actually listened. Not fake polite listening either. Real attention. The kind adults almost never give kids unless they're parents. I caught myself watching her more than once. The way she softened slightly around Lily. The way she relaxed every time she forgot to act like a CEO for a few seconds. It did something dangerous to my brain. My mother noticed too, because of course she did. She leaned toward me, while Lily explained why blue sports cars were emotionally unstable. "She likes her," Mom whispered. "Please don't start." I didn't say anything. "You're saying things with your face. I raised you. I know exactly what your defensive face looks like." I rubbed my forehead. Across from us, Claire glanced over. Am I interrupting a family argument? Technically, I said, this is considered bonding. That explains the psychological damage. Mom laughed loudly enough to embarrass me spiritually. After a while, Lily wandered toward the claw machine near the front entrance with my mother following behind her. That left me and Claire alone again. The silence settled differently now. Warmer, more aware. Claire folded Lily's drawing carefully beside her coffee cup. You keep that stuff I asked. She gave it to me. Most people throw those away. Her eyes lifted toward mine. I'm not most people. The thing about Claire was she rarely said emotional things directly. But sometimes she'd say simple things so honestly they landed harder than they should. Outside, rainwater slid down the diner windows in crooked lines while traffic crawled through the intersection nearby. Claire looked tired again suddenly. Not physically. Something deeper. You okay? I asked before I could stop myself. She hesitated, then shrugged one shoulder lightly. Board meeting this morning. That sounds painful. You have no idea. I leaned back slightly in the booth. Let me guess, rich men explaining your own company to you. Her eyes widened a fraction. Disturbingly accurate. People do it to mechanics too. I doubt they question whether you belong in your own garage. I gave her a look. Claire realized immediately. Oh, yeah. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed softly and stared down at her coffee. My father built Whitmore from one dealership, she said quietly. By the time I took over, everyone already had opinions about why I got the position. You were his daughter. I was convenient. The words came out flat, practiced, too practiced. Like she'd repeated them privately for years. I looked at her for a long moment. Then asked, you believe that? Claire didn't answer right away, which honestly was answer enough. Lily suddenly sprinted back toward the booth holding a stuffed purple octopus she'd won from the claw machine through either luck or witchcraft. I named him Marvin, she announced. Congratulations, I said. Claire looked at the toy seriously. He seems emotionally available, Lily gasped. You understand him. That made Claire laugh again. And there it was. That weird tight feeling in my chest I absolutely did not want. Because attraction was one thing. Attraction was manageable. But watching someone fit naturally into pieces of your life you kept separate from everybody else, that was dangerous. Especially for people like me. People who couldn't afford emotional mistakes. Eventually, my mother drove Lily home so I could finish adult conversations, which was her subtle way of meddling with plausible deniability. Claire watched them leave through the diner windows. She's good, she said quietly. My mom. Your daughter. I looked down at the table. Yeah. Claire traced one finger absent-mindedly along the edge of Lily's folded drawing. She looks at you like you hung the moon. I snorted softly. She looks at me like I know how to unclog toilets. That too. A small smile pulled at my mouth. Then Claire's phone buzzed again. This time she checked it immediately, and whatever she saw changed her expression. The softness disappeared almost instantly. Corporate armor sliding back into place. You have to go, I guessed. I have another investor dinner tonight. You sound thrilled. I'd rather rebuild another engine. She started reaching for her wallet. I shook my head immediately. Don't. Evan. You bought the coffee last time. That coffee came from a vending machine. Still counts? Claire looked at me for a second too long again, then slowly lowered her wallet. You know, she said carefully, most people around me either want something, or they want me to know they don't. I frowned slightly. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're very hard to read. Good. Her eyes held mine. That wasn't a compliment. The air between us shifted again after that. Quieter, closer, not enough to touch, not even close, but enough that I noticed the tiny gold flecks in her eyes under the diner lights. Enough that she noticed when I noticed. Then the waitress ruined the moment completely by appearing beside us holding the check. You two are disgustingly cute, by the way. Claire nearly choked on her coffee. I closed my eyes immediately. No, I muttered. We're really not. The waitress grinned. Claire stared at the table, trying and failing not to smile. And somehow that tiny, embarrassed smile hit me harder than anything else had all day. 3 nights later, Charlotte got hit with one of those heavy southern storms that makes the whole city feel temporary. Rain hammered rooftops. Wind shoved tree branches against power lines. Half the roads near downtown flooded before midnight. I was closing up the garage behind the gas station when the lights flickered hard enough to make me swear under my breath. Don't you dare, I muttered toward the ceiling. The garage survived another second. Barely. I wiped grease off my hands with an old rag while Miguel locked the front office. You heading home, he asked. In a minute. You say that every night. Yeah, well, one day I'll mean it. He snorted and disappeared into the rain toward his truck. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed across the workbench. Claire. I stared at the screen longer than I should have before answering. You crashed another prototype. Static crackled softly through the speaker before her voice came through. Number. Pause. Then my car won't start. I leaned back against the tool chest. Where are you? She gave me an address downtown near one of the newer office towers. Of course she was. What's it doing? Nothing. That's not helpful. I pushed the button and now the dashboard is blinking at me aggressively. Despite myself, I smiled a little. Battery warning. I don't know, it's orange. Very technical. You're enjoying this. A little. Thunder rolled loudly through the phone. Then silence. Not awkward silence. Just both of us listening to the storm for a second. Finally, I sighed. Stay where you are. I'll come take a look. You don't have to. Yeah, I said, grabbing my jacket. I kinda do. The rain downtown was worse. Water sprayed across my windshield every time another car passed, and the traffic lights reflected in the flooded streets like smeared paint. I found Claire sitting alone inside a black Range Rover near the curb outside her office building. Hazard lights blinking weakly. When I knocked on the window, she startled slightly before unlocking the doors. The second I climbed in, I noticed two things immediately. One, the battery was dead. Two, Claire looked exhausted. Not normal tired. Wrecked. Mascara slightly smudged under one eye. Hair falling loose. Phone abandoned face down beside her like she physically couldn't stand looking at it anymore. You look terrible, I said. She gave me a flat look. You always flirt this aggressively. That was concern. Disturbing. I checked the ignition once. Yep, battery. You leave something on. Number. Then your alternator's probably dying. Fantastic. I reached for the hood release. Pop that. Claire stared blankly ahead through the rain-streaked windshield. Then quietly asked, can I just sit here for 1 minute first? That stopped me. I looked over at her properly then. Really looked. Her shoulders were tight, jaw clenched, eyes distant in that dangerous way people get when they've been holding themselves together too long. So instead of getting out immediately, I leaned back into the seat. Bad night. Claire laughed once without humor. One investor wants me to cut half the service staff. She stared ahead. Another thinks I should sell the company before the market shifts. Another pause. And my board spent 40 minutes discussing whether I sound emotional during presentations. I frowned slowly. What does that even mean? I asked the same question. Rain drummed against the roof hard enough to shake the car slightly. Claire rubbed both hands over her face. I'm so tired of rooms where everyone's pretending not to measure each other. The words hung there between us. Heavy because they were true. I understood that feeling more than I wanted to admit. Different rooms, same exhaustion. After a while I asked quietly, you eat dinner? Number. You sleep recently? Also no. Claire. What? You can't run on coffee and resentment forever. That got the faintest ghost of a smile. Watch me. I shook my head and finally stepped out into the rain. The storm hit cold immediately. By the time I opened the hood, water had already soaked through my jacket sleeves. A minute later, Claire appeared beside me holding an umbrella awkwardly over both of us. You didn't have to come out here, I said. You're getting drenched. Occupational hazard. Lightning flashed somewhere behind the skyline. For a second, the entire street lit up silver white. Claire looked at me then. Really looked. You always do that, she said quietly. Do what? Act like things don't bother you. I tightened a battery connection carefully. Things bother me constantly. No, she said softly. You hide it constantly. That landed harder than I expected. I glanced toward her. Rainwater tapped against the umbrella above us while traffic hissed through puddles nearby. Claire's hair was damp around her face now. No makeup perfection, no boardroom posture. Just a tired woman standing beside me in the middle of a storm, trying not to fall apart in public. And suddenly, the space between us felt dangerously small. You know what the worst part is? She asked quietly. The company. She shook her head once. Everyone thinks confidence means never needing anyone. I stared at her for a second too long, then looked back at the engine. Yeah, I said, that gets heavy. Silence. Not empty silence. The kind filled with things people almost say. My hands brushed hers accidentally when she adjusted the umbrella lower against the wind. Both of us paused instantly. Tiny contact, barely anything. Still, I felt it. Claire did too. I knew because her breathing changed slightly. Just enough. Then my phone started ringing. Lily. Reality crashing back in immediately. I stepped away a little too fast and answered. Hey, Bug. Dad, Grandma says the storm might kill the Wi-Fi. That's a dramatic sentence. She says electricity is a privilege. Your grandma says a lot of things. Claire looked away toward the rain-dark street while I listened to Lily ramble about thunder sounding like angry bowling. And for some reason, watching Claire stand there quietly under the umbrella while my daughter talked in my ear made something twist painfully in my chest. Not because it was romantic, because it felt possible, which honestly scared me more. After the call ended, neither of us moved immediately. Then Claire spoke without looking at me. "You should go home." "Probably." Instead, I closed the hood gently and said, "Your alternator's shot." She nodded once, then finally looked back at me. "Will you still help me tomorrow?" The question wasn't really about the car anymore, and we both knew it. The next morning, I tried very hard to convince myself nothing weird had happened in the rain, which should tell you immediately that something weird absolutely happened in the rain. I was changing brake pads on a Civic when Miguel leaned against the garage doorway holding coffee. "You look emotionally compromised." I didn't glance up. "That's not a real diagnosis?" "It is in Spanish." I tightened the caliper harder than necessary. Miguel took a sip of coffee slowly. "So, rich lady." "There is no rich lady." She had alternator problems. That's what the kids are calling it now." I threw a dirty rag at him. He laughed loud enough to scare a customer walking past the garage. The thing about people who've known you too long is they notice tiny changes immediately. Like the fact I'd checked my phone 4 times in 10 minutes without realizing it, or that I'd shaved this morning, which in my defense could have been unrelated. Probably wasn't. Around noon, my phone finally buzzed. "Claire." Just seeing her name did something irritating to my heartbeat. "You survived the storm," I answered. "Barely." Her voice sounded distracted. Office noise hummed faintly in the background. "I wanted to ask you something. That sentence usually costs money." A pause. "Then would you consider consulting for Whitmore full-time?" I stopped moving completely. Across the garage, Miguel slowly lowered his coffee cup like he could smell drama from 40 feet away. "You're serious?" "Yes." I leaned back against the tool chest. "Number." Claire exhaled softly through the phone. "You answered very fast, because I thought about it the first time. You never actually let me finish the offer." "Don't need to." "Evan, I'm not putting on one of those little branded quarter zips and pretending corporate meetings matter." "That's oddly specific. You people love quarter zips." Miguel nearly choked, trying not to laugh nearby. Claire stayed quiet a second longer this time. "Then, this wouldn't be some entry-level position." "Still no. You'd have full authority over diagnostics." "Number." "We'd triple what you're making now." That one hit harder than I wanted, because she wasn't wrong. My apartment ceiling leaked every time it rained hard enough. Lily's inhalers cost more than they should, and my savings account looked like a practical joke. Claire knew none of that. Still, hearing the number she mentioned made my chest tighten. I rubbed one hand over my jaw slowly. "You think money fixes everything?" "No," she answered immediately, which surprised me. Then she added quietly, "I think being exhausted all the time changes people." That landed uncomfortably close to home. I stared out toward the rainwater still pooled along the street outside the garage. Cars passing, people rushing through another workday. Part of me hated that she saw through me sometimes. The other part hated that I liked it. "I'm not coming back to dealership life," I said finally. "You say that like it's prison." "For some people it is." Claire went silent again. When she spoke next, her voice sounded sharper. "You know, not everyone offering help is trying to own you." There it was. The first real crack between us. I straightened slowly. People with money usually don't know the difference. The second I said it, the air changed. Even through the phone, I could feel it. Claire didn't answer immediately. When she finally did, her voice had gone colder. "That's unfair." "Probably, but you still mean it." I looked down at the grease on my hands. "Yeah." A long pause stretched between us. Then office voices muffled in the background near her side of the call. Someone asking for signatures, another meeting, another demand. Finally, Claire said quietly, "I should get back." Claire. But she'd already hung up. I stared at the phone screen for another second before locking it. Miguel walked over carefully. "Poof! Don't. You wounded the rich lady." "I didn't wound anybody." Miguel gave me a look. "That's unfortunately not true." I went back to work harder than necessary after that. Brake pads, oil changes, transmission diagnostics, anything repetitive enough to shut my brain off. It didn't work. Because the problem wasn't the conversation itself. It was the fact Claire had sounded hurt, and worse, that I understood why. Around 4 that afternoon, I picked Lily up from school. She climbed into the truck holding another stack of drawings. "You forgot snack day." "Damn it. I knew I forgot something." "I had celery, Dad." "That sounds traumatic." It was. I smiled tiredly while pulling out of the pickup lane. Then Lily glanced sideways at me. You made your storm face. What does that mean? The face you make when your feelings are annoying. I nearly missed the stop sign. Who talks like that at 7? You do. Fair enough. We stopped at a grocery store on the way home. Nothing glamorous. Fluorescent lights, shopping carts with one bad wheel, country music playing too quietly overhead. Lily wandered beside me, tossing cereal boxes dramatically into the cart while I tried calculating whether I could stretch groceries another week before payday. Halfway through produce, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number this time. I answered distractedly while comparing prices on apples. Hello? Evan. Male voice. Familiar. I recognized him immediately. Greg Lawson, former diagnostic lead from Hawthorne. A guy who used to wear expensive watches while complaining about paying child support. What do you want, Greg? He laughed once. Straight to it. Nice. I'm shopping. I heard you've been hanging around Whitmore. My grip tightened slightly on the cart handle. So people are talking. People should try hobbies. Greg ignored that. You know Claire's board thinks she's distracted lately. I felt something cold settle low in my stomach. What exactly are you implying? Nothing. Just weird timing. Suddenly the single dad mechanic starts showing up around the CEO right before contract season. There it was. Ugly, predictable, infuriating. I looked over at Lily comparing yogurt brands nearby, completely unaware of the conversation happening 5 feet away. You done? I asked flatly. Greg chuckled softly. Careful, man. People like her don't date guys like us. They use us until the optics change. The line went dead. I stood there staring at my phone screen while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Then Lily held up 2 yogurt containers seriously. Which one says emotional stability? I looked at her, then suddenly laughed despite everything. But the feeling in my chest afterward didn't go away. Because for the first time since meeting Claire, someone else had said out loud the exact thing I'd been trying not to think about. For the next 2 days, Claire and I barely spoke. Not intentionally at first, just carefully. Like 2 people suddenly aware the floor beneath them might not be stable. She sent one text about the alternator replacement invoice. I replied with a thumbs up. Very mature emotional behavior from both of us. By Friday afternoon, even Lily noticed. You're being weird with shiny car lady. I kept my eyes on the road. I'm literally driving. No, like emotionally weird. Again, who taught you these phrases? You and Grandma watched too many sad movies. That felt unfairly accurate. Rain clouds hung low over Charlotte again, while traffic crawled past strip malls and office parks. October was starting to creep into the air finally. Cooler mornings, football flags outside suburban houses, pumpkin displays showing up in grocery stores way too early. Normal life continuing while my brain acted stupid. I dropped Lily off at my mother's apartment before heading toward the garage for another late shift. Halfway there, my phone buzzed. Tom Bennett. I almost ignored it. Almost. What? Well, hello to you too. I'm working. Yeah, this is technically about work. I pulled into the garage lot slowly. What now? Tom hesitated long enough that I immediately got suspicious. Then you hear what people are saying over at Whitmore. My jaw tightened instantly. Depends which people. Mostly management. Of course. I shut off the truck engine and sat there staring through the windshield at rainwater gathering in cracked pavement. Tom sighed into the phone. Look, I'm just warning you because I know how this stuff spreads. Spreads how? They think Claire's giving you special treatment. I laughed once without humor. She offered me a job. I said no. Doesn't matter. That's insane. Welcome to corporate America. I rubbed both hands over my face slowly. Tom lowered his voice. Greg Lawson's been talking too. There it was. Of course it was Greg. That guy's still alive entirely out of spite. Probably. What exactly is he saying? Another pause. Then, reluctantly, that Claire's distracted because of you, that you're playing some long game. I closed my eyes. The worst part, not the rumor itself. The worst part was knowing people would believe it. Because guys like me aren't supposed to end up around women like Claire unless money's involved somehow. I'd spent enough years around dealerships to understand the social math. Blue-collar mechanics were useful, entertaining sometimes, but temporary. Never equal. Tom kept talking. Claire's been shutting it down hard for what it's worth. That surprised me enough I didn't answer immediately. Then Tom added carefully, but honestly the board's watching her pretty closely right now. Something ugly twisted low in my chest after that. Not jealousy. Not anger exactly. Fear maybe. Fear that I was becoming another problem Claire had to manage. I hung up shortly after and walked into the garage already irritated with myself for caring. Miguel took one look at my face and muttered, emotional constipation again. Please stop inventing diagnoses. But the night got worse around 8, because Claire showed up. Not in heels this time, not polished, not CEO perfect. Just dark jeans, loose sweater, tired eyes. Miguel spotted her first and immediately vanished into the back office with the survival instincts of a man avoiding emotional crossfire. Claire stood awkwardly near the service bay while rain dripped from her jacket sleeves. We need to talk. That sentence has never improved anybody's evening. I wiped my hands slowly with a rag. About? Her expression shifted slightly. Careful now, guarded. Someone told me you left Hawthorne because you walked out during a major contract failure. There it was. Not the rumor itself. The fact she'd asked. I stared at her for a second too long. Then looked away first. Who told you that? Does it matter? Yeah, I said quietly. Actually, it does. Claire folded her arms tighter. I'm trying to understand what's true. Something sharp flashed through me then. Exhaustion, humiliation, old anger I thought I'd buried years ago. You could have just asked me. I am asking you. No, I said, you're verifying. The silence after that turned ugly fast. Rain hammered the metal roof overhead, while somewhere in the garage a compressor hissed loudly before shutting off again. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. You think I wanted to believe gossip? I think you're used to treating people like risk assessments. That's not fair. Neither is this conversation. For a second, she looked genuinely hurt, then frustrated, then both. I defended you to my board all week, she said quietly. I defended you when people implied things about us that... She stopped herself abruptly. About us. The words hung there heavily between us. I felt them too. That made everything worse somehow. I leaned back against the tool chest, suddenly exhausted. You want to know why I left Hawthorne? Claire didn't answer, but she didn't look away either. So I continued. Lily was in the hospital. The anger drained from her face immediately. She was 3. Couldn't breathe right for almost 2 days. I swallowed once. I stayed at the hospital instead of showing up for some launch event Greg thought mattered more. Claire stayed completely still. I laughed softly without humor. They called it attendance inconsistency. The garage suddenly sounded too quiet. Even the rain seemed farther away now. Claire's voice came out smaller than before. Evan. My wife left 3 months later. There. Said out loud now. The thing I almost never talked about, because once people know where you broke, they start looking at you differently afterward. Claire looked devastated, not pitying. Worse, like she finally understood the shape of something painful she'd been touching blindly. I didn't know, she whispered. No, I said. You didn't ask. That one landed hard. I regretted it immediately after, because Claire flinched slightly like I'd actually hit something vulnerable. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then quietly, almost swallowed by the storm outside, she said, I should have asked better. Not defensive, not polished, just honest. And somehow, that nearly broke me more than if she'd argued back. I looked past her toward the rain-dark parking lot, toward the city lights blurred by water and distance, then finally asked without looking directly at her. So what now? Claire stood there for another second, wet hair, tired eyes, hands trembling just slightly at her sides. And when she answered, her voice sounded more careful than I'd ever heard it before. I honestly don't know. The investor showcase started at 6:30 Saturday evening. By 6:22, the prototype was dead again. Not fully dead. Worse, intermittent. Those are the problems mechanics hate most, because intermittent failures turn everybody paranoid. The car started twice in testing, failed once in staging, then threw 3 conflicting warnings across the dashboard, right as investors began arriving. Perfect timing. I was halfway through making boxed mac and cheese for Lily when Claire called. I stared at her name lighting up my phone while steam curled out of the pot. For one stupid second, I considered letting it ring. Not because I was angry anymore. Because I knew hearing her voice would matter. And that felt dangerous. Dad, Lily said from the kitchen table, your face is doing the thing again. I answered before she could continue psychoanalyzing me further. Claire spoke immediately. It's happening again. No hello. Just exhaustion. I leaned against the counter. What changed? I don't know. It's throwing thermal instability warnings, but diagnostics are inconsistent. Behind her I could hear voices, movement, pressure. One investor laughing too loudly somewhere nearby. I closed my eyes briefly. You touched the compensation map again, didn't you? Silence. Then one of the engineers updated the calibration this afternoon. Jesus Christ. Lily looked up from her coloring book. That sounds expensive. It probably is. Claire exhaled shakily into the phone. I know I have no right asking after this week, but I'm on my way. The showroom at Whitmore looked different on investor nights. Brighter somehow, sharper. Everything polished within an inch of its life. Men in tailored jackets stood near luxury cars pretending they understood engines because they owned stock portfolios. Women in designer dresses balanced champagne glasses while discussing market expansion like human emotion was a rounding error. And in the middle of all of it, Claire stood near the prototype looking like she hadn't slept properly in days. She spotted me the second I walked through the glass doors. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then one of the board members noticed me too. "Wonderful. Mr. Miller," he said carefully in the same tone people use when unsure whether someone belongs near expensive furniture. Claire didn't even look at him. "She requested you specifically," another investor asked. That question carried weight underneath it. I heard it. Claire heard it too. And this time, she didn't dodge it. "Yes," she said clearly. The room quieted slightly. Claire stepped toward me under the bright showroom lights. "He's the reason this prototype runs at all." Nobody spoke after that. Not the board, not the investors, not even Greg Lawson standing near the service entrance looking like somebody had just insulted him personally. For the first time since I met her, Claire wasn't trying to manage the room. She was standing beside me in it. And weirdly, it mattered more than I expected. I moved toward the engine bay immediately. What exactly did they change? One nervous engineer handed me a tablet. Just calibration refinement. I scanned the update logs once, then looked up slowly. "You copied unstable compensation values into the thermal fallback sequence." The engineer blinked. "That shouldn't shut down ignition." "It does if your timing delay already runs hot." Greg stepped forward, then arms folded. "We tested the sequence." I glanced at him. "You tested it in a controlled bay at room temperature." He didn't answer. Because he knew I was right. The investors nearby watched everything now with uncomfortable fascination. Corporate people love confidence until something expensive breaks in public. Then suddenly they worship competence. I slid into the driver's seat and restarted the diagnostic cycle manually while the showroom buzzed quietly around us. Claire stayed beside the open hood, close enough that I could feel her tension. "You okay?" I asked quietly without looking up. "Number. Good. Means you still have survival instincts." To my surprise, she laughed softly. Tiny sound, almost hidden. Still enough to steady the air between us again. I recalibrated the fallback mapping by hand while investors pretended not to stare. 3 minutes later, the engine turned over cleanly. Steady idle. No warning lights. No shutdown. Just that low, controlled hum again filling the showroom. The same sound from the night everything started. Except this time the room was full. A few investors actually applauded lightly, which felt ridiculous. I climbed out of the car, wiping grease across another borrowed dealership rag. Greg looked annoyed enough to develop hypertension. Good. One older investor approached carefully. "You with Whitmore full-time now?" Before I could answer, Claire spoke first. "Number?" The investor looked surprised. Claire's eyes stayed on me, but I wish he was. There it was again. Not flirting, not performance. Honesty. Dangerous, quiet honesty. The showcase recovered after that. People drank champagne, contracts got discussed, rich men relaxed once their money stopped feeling threatened. Normal corporate resurrection. But around 9:30, Claire finally escaped outside to the back parking lot behind the showroom. I found her there leaning against the railing near the employee entrance heels, abandoned beside her. Charlotte's skyline glowed softly in the distance beyond wet pavement and traffic lights. For a while we just stood there listening to cars pass. "You know," she said, "eventually this is probably the worst investor event of my career. You had 2 engine failures and 1 public nervous breakdown. Strong numbers." She smiled tiredly, then looked over at me. "They still listen to me tonight." "Yeah. I think it's because for once I stopped trying to sound untouchable." I leaned against the railing beside her. Rainwater still clung to the edges of the pavement from earlier storms. Claire looked down at her bare feet briefly, then quietly asked, "What does Lily usually eat for breakfast?" I blinked once. "That's weirdly specific. She seems like a pancake person." "She absolutely is." Claire nodded thoughtfully. Then, after a small hesitation, "Would it be completely inappropriate if I asked whether I could join you both sometime?" No dramatic confession, no cinematic speech. Just that. Soft, careful, real. I looked at her for a long moment under the dim parking lot lights. At the tired eyes, the loosened hair. The woman who'd spent months trying to hold an entire company together while secretly feeling alone inside it. And for the first time in years, wanting someone near me didn't feel like a threat. It just felt scary. Which was different. Finally, I looked away toward the city lights and said quietly, She likes chocolate chips in the pancakes. Claire smiled then, slowly, relieved, warm enough to reach all the way into my chest. And standing there beside her in the cool North Carolina night, I realized something. The engine was never the thing either of us were trying to fix. The real problem was two exhausted people who forgot what it felt like when someone stayed. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, I honestly want to know what moment stayed with you the most. Was it the rainstorm, the diner, the late-night garage, or maybe just two people slowly realizing they didn't have to carry everything alone anymore? I think that's what this story was really about in the end. Not grand romance, not perfect timing, not dramatic speeches. Just the quiet kind of love that starts when somebody keeps showing up, even after seeing the messy parts. So tell me down in the comments, do you think relationships work better when they start slowly like this, or would you have walked away way earlier than Evan and Claire did? And if this story made your night a little softer or gave you that ache in your chest feeling, good storytelling sometimes leaves behind. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There are more stories coming soon. Messy ones, quiet ones, complicated ones. Just like real people. Sometimes the people carrying the heaviest weight are the ones who look the calmest on the outside. That's probably the hardest lesson life teaches us as adults. You never really know what someone had to survive before they showed up in front of you. The tired mechanic fixing your car might be holding his family together by a thread. The woman sitting quietly in a business meeting might be fighting every day just to prove she belongs there. And sometimes, the strongest people are simply the ones who kept going even after life gave them every reason not to. I think we spend too much time waiting for perfect people, perfect timing, perfect love, perfect lives. But real connection usually happens in imperfect places. Late-night conversations, awkward silences, moments when someone notices you're exhausted without making you explain it. Moments when somebody stays, not because they have to, because they want to. And honestly, that kind of love, whether it's romantic friendship or family, is rare. So if this story reminded you of someone who stayed during your hardest season, or someone you wish had stayed, tell me in the comments. I really do read them. And if you enjoy emotional storytelling like this, slow burn romance, realistic characters, and stories that feel painfully human, don't forget to subscribe and join this little corner of the internet with us. There are a lot more stories waiting for you here.